All right. So if we could start, Dustin, with you just giving us an introduction to who you are and where you're from.
Sure. My name is Dustin. I'm 33 years old, born and raised in Cologne. Probably we'll come back to this one later.
Yeah.
Traveled a little bit the world. So lived in Spain for a couple of years. Lived in China, which was a truly amazing experience. And then ended up in San Francisco, working there for almost 2 years. I'm very much into kind of like coffee, being coffee addict, and kind of like into surfing, which I actually caught up in San Francisco. Now kind of like started Homelike 5 years ago. Company has been growing very well since then. Actually, the initial idea was to start it in San Francisco. Cost of living and all of that, it's kind of like a little bit different there.
Yeah.
But since 5 years, we are building an online marketplace for furnished apartments.
Yeah. Could you give a short overview of like why you decided to found Homelike in the first place?
There are a couple of reasons actually. So I, including my co-founder Christoph, we have been traveling a lot and relocating to different cities and countries for work. And we have lived in service apartments and boarding houses, and we were kind of a little bit fed up with corporates in a way how they deal with long-term travel. So there's tons of technology and options for shorter accommodation types. So hotels or alternative accommodations like Airbnb for a shorter period of time. But when it comes to relocating for a couple of months to a new city, there's no transparency about pricing. There's no transparency about the different apartment types, and no technology integrated into the corporate processes. So this idea has probably been growing since many years. But basically, when I was in San Francisco, and I relocated there as well as an expatriate, and the corporate is doing everything for you, right? So you have the AAA insurance coverage, they take care of the hotel and everything, but then you actually ask, okay, where can I stay for a longer period of time? They refer you to classified ad platforms, so on and so forth. So they can basically take it offline and actually put it to yourself to organize that. And the hypothesis actually was there are more than 55 million expatriates out there. What actually they're doing when they relocate. And this is actually how we got started into the furnished apartment, corporate housing, temporary housing, however you may call it. And then actually we started back in 2014 to build technology around that, integrate into corporate processes, talking with a lot of HR managers, so on and so forth. This was basically the origin of this company.
So how did you really start the business? Were you guys like building the technology yourselves and kind of bootstrapping stuff, or did you go straight to securing investment and growing fast?
Yeah, great question. In order to get the entire story behind this company, you need to know that when we started in San Francisco, I was still employed, and Christoph as well. So I actually informed my previous employer that I actually want to start my own business, and then I kept actually staying in San Francisco for another 6 months. And Christoph is the lucky guy in the sense of that he's having a green card for the US, so he had a good opportunity to come to San Francisco quite frequently. But we also realized very early on that starting a business in the Silicon Valley, it's super expensive. And you probably need to go right away toward the venture capital track in order to receive the first investment, in order to kind of like make a living there. So very early on, actually, we decided, okay, probably Germany, Cologne is a better idea, especially when you want to build up a B2B platform, which takes a little bit longer to really gain traction because of the longer sales cycles. So what we basically did for the first 8 months, roughly, we bootstrapped the entire company. So I flew back actually a day after Germany won the World Cup. I flew back from San Francisco to Cologne. Then we had it at Cluster House, which at that time was a little bit of a dodgy co-working place. So there were some very smart entrepreneurs who said, okay, we need more space before the WeWorks of the world really kind of like scaled the business, where just entrepreneurs can kind of like build up their businesses. So we had one office there. We were sharing that office with also an entrepreneur you may know very well, Tom Bachem, so the founder of the Code University. And we were sitting in a room together with like 3 different companies, basically. And then we just like hired our first engineer, was someone from Buenos Aires, but he relocated to Düsseldorf a couple of years earlier. We didn't have any money to pay him, so we just like gave him a little bit of equity. That's how you do that.
Yeah.
And then we built up the platform within 8 months.
Okay.
And then we did go live in February 2015. Got our first bookings coming in a couple of weeks later. And then I think 4 or 5 months into the business, we got our first investment from business angels. And this is also kind of like super interesting how the ecosystem in Cologne has been growing, because all of our business angels, most of them actually, are born and raised in Cologne. So Tom Bachem, for example, Gerald Schönbucher, who founded Hitmeister and sold it to Real, Benjamin Roos from StudiTemps, Daniel Arnold, and a couple of others. So that was actually how we got the first money.
Nice. So I'm just thinking about the timescales there. It sounds like it took maybe just over a year for you to like validate the business idea and actually achieve, like, could we call it market fit, like revenue?
Yeah, probably. And when you ask me, could we have done that faster? Yes. It was like.
Oh, really?
I mean, 12 months, like a really long time, right? And probably looking back, we could have achieved that probably in 6 months' time. But we have never built a marketplace before, you know?
Yeah.
And probably we invested too much time in having a very comprehensive marketplace with like every single feature and making it more beautiful here and more beautiful there. And this feature definitely needs to be implemented. So we definitely kind of like passed the point of MVP. And probably looking back, kind of like I would just have said, okay, let's cut out these features because it doesn't really matter. And it just like tried to get the first booking so that we can show that we have product market fit. But also saying this, we kind of like disrupt the real estate industry on the supply side, and we disrupt the B2B industry on the demand side. So you're actually working with 2 different industries at the same time, and it's a lot of complexity in both industries, right? So it took also some time to understand the dynamics, to get into the networks, to really understand what are the product features they're looking for. But we definitely knew that the market is gigantic enough to build a huge business. But it's always like with startups. Many people have the idea, but it really comes down to the execution and how good your team is. And therefore, we wanted to take a little bit more time before we kind of like step on the gas and go out there. I think until today it played out really well.
Yeah, clearly. So when you're going through that first year of kind of starting the business and growing it, did you utilize any of the startup resources locally in Cologne, like Starplatz or Startup Safari or Pirate Summit, or did you guys really just kind of do it on your own?
We definitely had support from a lot of people in the beginning, and that's, I think, the most valuable thing you can actually get from pre-seed investors, business angels. And just like the names I was mentioning earlier, they helped us to get into the networks. And at that time, I haven't been in Cologne for probably 4 years, so I wasn't that kind of like experienced in the startup network here. But we could take advantage of our early stage investors. And also the cluster house, I don't know if you have been there, but again, it's kind of, I think it's 8 floors or so, and there were probably 150 people in the building.
Oh, wow.
And probably 50 plus startups, like smaller startups. IO, actually, Tim Schumacher.
Oh, really?
You guys also interviewed, I guess.
Yeah.
He also had an office with IO there before they actually moved to another place. And IO was kind of like the largest company in this building. But when you work in such an environment, you automatically kind of like get in contact with other founders. I didn't know that much about the Startplatz at that stage. because we had our own kind of like little Startplatz at Clusterhaus,
Yeah.
And then when you actually talk to founders, there are no other founders, and then you go to founder breakfast. I think NRW is doing something like that, or they did actually at that time. It was kind of like once a month. They had a startup breakfast at a little cafe. So you did go there, you met up with other people, and this is, I guess, how also founders should approach that in the very early days. Just like reach out on LinkedIn to other founders and entrepreneurs and just ask for help, right?
Yeah.
This is how we also got started, and it's always about give and take. And this was really nice. And I think in Cologne, the special thing about the city, also compared to probably larger startup hubs like Berlin, for example, there are not that many entrepreneurs here, right? So if you know probably 10 or 15 people, you may have access to the entire ecosystem right away. And
really, that's a good point, actually.
And this is so fascinating. And you mentioned Pirate Summit, right? We did go 3 times to the Pirate Summit. We know also the founders pretty well, who are doing an amazing job for promoting the city and the region here. And when you go there, it's kind of like so many people, right? People who want to start a business you have met a couple of years earlier. So I think summarizing all of that, it's a very kind of like people-driven city in a sense of people are really willing to help you. We have Carnival and all of the other kind of like city social events, which probably also like contribute to that a bit.
Yeah.
But that's probably also one of the reasons why we like it being here, also compared to other hubs.
Yeah, there's more of a community feel in the city, I think, compared to, like we were saying earlier, London. You don't have that really so much at all. So I think some young or early entrepreneurs want to keep their idea a secret and not tell anyone because they're like, someone will steal it. But actually, it sounds like your openness and using the network and tapping into people has probably accelerated the beginning of Homelike faster than if you had just kind of kept it as a keepsafe and not told anyone and grown it from your bedroom. So you mentioned that San Fran was too expensive to start the business. So when you left there, you still could have gone anywhere in the world. So why Cologne?
I think first of all, I think it's great to start a business in San Francisco, right? But just like for us, we decided B2B takes longer, and we don't want to have the pressure from the very, very first day to come up with something where we're not really convinced about. But there are many, many advantages being in the Silicon Valley. So I wouldn't compare the Silicon Valley with kind of like Rhine Valley or however you call our region, or people actually try to make it up for marketing purposes, right? But
I think Berlin has something like Silicon Alley.
Yeah, I think
they do the same thing.
I mean, copying stuff. I'm not a big fan of that, to be honest. We have our own identity in this city and in this region, and but it's a fair point. So why did we decide for Cologne? So when I probably would not have been kind of like born and raised in this city, maybe we could have decided for Hamburg, Munich as well. But I think for us it was important that we start a business in an environment where we have a network already. I lived at my parents' place for the first 2 or 3 months after I came back from San Francisco. Christoph already had his apartment here. We knew people. We had access to interns, so we didn't have money, as I said in the beginning. So we knew people from university. We could actually approach to do an internship in our place. So for us, it seems to be like a fairly easy and simple kind of like decision in order to get to the next stage of the business, which was basically just like starting something, But it wasn't that we did a kind of like location analysis and like pros and cons, Cologne, Berlin, Munich, Hamburg. We didn't do a scientific approach. It was just like, okay, what's the easiest way to get this started? Okay, let's fly back to Cologne. I can actually check into my parents' place. Maybe they can also help me out with kind of like cooking dinner or whatsoever. Since then, obviously, we had some discussions about kind of like, should we go somewhere else?
Oh, really?
So, I mean, that's when you're venture capital financed business, I think at some point you almost always kind of like reach the point where you're short in talent, you know. I mean, you're also like from the recruiting industry, and I mean that's your business, right? So if there wouldn't be any need from companies to recruit people faster, probably there wouldn't be recruiting business out there.
I wouldn't have a job.
You wouldn't have a job. So also like throughout kind of like a hyper growth phase where we have been going through since 4 years now, you have actually points where you need more tech people, where you need kind of like top managers from top firms, from global firms, and you need to kind of like convince them that Homelike is going to be the next big thing, but also that Cologne, it's a great place to work.
Yeah.
When you're right in this moment where you are not able to hire those people right away because of different circumstances, then obviously investors sometimes also bring up, okay, what would happen when you move to another location? Would then kind of like this problem disappear? And we had a lot of discussions about that, but I think, and probably we'll ask this question later, Cologne versus Berlin, which I think would be the wrong comparison. But if we would relocate the entire business to Berlin, probably we have access to more talents, but also the competition on those talents is probably 10 times, 15 times higher compared to what we have in Cologne.
Yeah.
You know, I think there are always disadvantages and advantages about locations. What we like here, and Trivago is a perfect example, they built up a huge business in Düsseldorf, actually IPO'd the business. Düsseldorf, I would say, it's not globally not perceived as big and great as Cologne. I mean, I need to say that from a Cologne perspective.
Yeah.
But they were actually able to hire more than 1,000 people there. So why are we not able to hire 1,000 people in Cologne? So I think in the end it's about execution, and I think great businesses are everywhere. That's also when you take a look at Münster, Flaschenpost, for example, but also kind of like at other smaller cities throughout the country. They're also able to build great businesses. And I think great people will always go there where great businesses are being built.
Yeah, I think I agree exactly with what you're saying about the benefits of going to Berlin. I think you can combat possibly a shorter local talent pool with a more holistic hiring strategy. And if you're focusing on your employer brand, then you can grow a business here by hiring from outside of Cologne, and people will come here if you do it in the right way. So have you experienced any benefits of Cologne's geographical location? Being so close to other international cities, has that helped you or the business in any way?
It probably helpful, but it's not that I see it. If that's a question, if I see it in our business growth, you know, I think it's definitely an advantage that we have a couple of airports actually. I mean, one airport in Cologne, but also a couple of airports around. It's very close to Frankfurt Airport, just like an hour right. You can also go to Düsseldorf Airport. You are very, very fast in the Netherlands. You know, there are cheap flight options also to go to the UK and to Spain. All of this is great, but I think for us that's not the reason why we are here.
Yeah.
Obviously, you also have great universities. You have University of Cologne, very close by. You have RWTH Aachen, which is also just like an hour and a bit away. All of this is probably great for the location, but we have 28 nationalities at Homelike, right? So the people basically come from all around the globe. So I think we have people from more than 35 countries in our organization. And does it really matter that the airport is in Cologne and not in whatever, Hanover? It doesn't really matter, I guess. But maybe at a later stage, this will be like a benefit for our business. But at the moment, it's just like great that this is there.
Yeah.
But it's not that we actually benefit tremendously from that.
Yeah. We have heard from some people that Cologne is quite a good spot for a B2B business because there's such a dense transport infrastructure and you are so close to these international cities. It does make it a little bit easier and more convenient to go and sell a business product, whereas Berlin, they have more consumer products because they are a bit more isolated perhaps. So on the other side of things, have you felt any big disadvantages to being based here?
I mean, when I talk to employees who relocate from outside Germany, let's say DACH region, they actually tend to say that when you don't speak German, it's really hard in Cologne. I don't know what your experience is there, but just like opening up a bank account, and some people do have a hard time opening that up because people are not able to speak English. When you go to restaurants here, I mean, when you leave a little bit the city centers or all the place around the cathedral, where all the tourists actually going to, when you go a little bit kind of like outside, you barely get kind of like menus in the restaurant in English, right? If you go to the traditional kind of like restaurants at Cologne, and I did go with a couple of our employees, the kind of like waiters are not speaking English. Is that a huge disadvantage? I don't know. But I think where Cologne could definitely kind of like be more international, just like credit card payments. Huge thing. I spend a lot of time in Barcelona, actually, where we also do have an office, or London, and you pay everything with credit card. If it's good or bad, that's a different discussion, right? But in Cologne, someone paying with credit card, it's tough, you know? You need to have cash on hand, so on and so forth. These are the little things, right? Is this kind of like an important thing for employees relocating to Cologne, yes or no? I don't think so. However, once I actually landed in Cologne, this could be a factor to keep them in the city. Because then when they actually visit Berlin, where it sometimes happens that you go to a restaurant and the people are not able to speak German, which is actually the opposite. It's super, super great for international people. But it's that kind of like typical German then, you know? So I think in terms of language, in terms of kind of like being international as a city, we have still some room for improvement. When it comes to the startup ecosystem, we talked about the Pirate Summit, which is a great format. I think they were also named one of the most creative and craziest startup conferences, at least in Europe, which I can definitely agree on. But also the city is doing a lot of things. And I remember one trip I did to Tel Aviv, and I was surprised. I did go to SOSA, which is an incubator kind of like thing in Tel Aviv, and they have like a wall where all the sponsors are listed. And in the middle there was like saying City of Cologne ambassador. And I was in Tel Aviv, and I realized in Tel Aviv that Cologne and Tel Aviv, that they do have a strong cooperation on the startup side. And the question there is, why did I realize that in Tel Aviv and not in Cologne? You know, I think communication and all of this is key here. And it's not that much about the different initiatives they are running. It's more about how you communicate them and how can you actually get the startups kind of like being pulled into this different initiatives the city is running.
I personally find, I think because maybe I am in the city more of the time, that not speaking German isn't so much of a problem. I tried to learn it 2 years ago and use it, and most people just spoke back to me in English. So I just stopped because I didn't feel like I need it. But I can imagine maybe if you're living in more of the rural parts, probably it does become more of a factor. So from a recruitment perspective, if we work for a business who say, Jamie, we need someone that speaks fluent German, then we can say, right, well, you need to double your time to hire because the talent pool is so much smaller. So from a growth perspective, keeping the business international and English speaking is a significant factor in how quickly you can get the people through the door and inside the business and working. I think the startups are a bit more open to that, but not even the larger business, like the medium businesses that are a bit more established are still slightly behind, and their attitudes are not as modern in like, we need to kind of actually be a bit more flexible and give the talent that we need something to make it easier for them to join us. They're still in this mindset of, well, we're a great company, they're lucky to work for us. So we're not going to give, they're lucky that we're going to hire them, which is the wrong attitude, especially in tech anyway. So the way you're doing things is definitely the better way of doing it. And since you have travelled so much, that helps you understand your own culture so much better. So to someone who has never ever visited the city, how would you describe living here and what it's like to be in the city?
That's a very, very great question. I mean, the first thing I always mention when I talk about Cologne, and a lot of people also internationally, they know Cologne.
Yeah,
it's interesting. And the topics they're actually mentioning is our soccer club.
first one to win the Bundesliga, if I remember.
Yeah, not that they are playing super well, but just
anymore.
like the atmosphere in the stadium. And probably the second thing is the people in the city. And I think this is I wouldn't say it's a benefit, right? It's just like the DNA of this. It's about the people. I mean, if you have ever had the chance to enjoy Carnival here, then you will definitely get it. I mean, people are going crazy for this kind of like couple of weeks or days throughout the year, and I think people is a really, really important factor, and especially when I realized that the people who are joining our company and have never been to Cologne before, after they got into the networks and after they got to know the local people here, they really start to enjoy it. But also, if they're not able to get into this kind of like social network, they probably also see the not so good things about the city. And unfortunately, Cologne is not famous for the beautiful architecture. I mean, we have this amazing cathedral. That's also the reason why a lot of tourists actually come to the city. But during the World War, actually, the city was completely bombed, right? And so it's not beautiful in the sense of, wow, okay, we have such amazing buildings here.
Yeah.
But I think when you go to the pubs and you interact with the people there, when you go to the stadium, when you enjoy Carnival, people are very, very open-minded, and you can actually go alone on a Friday night to any pub, and I guarantee you that it will take a short period of time, and then you're actually in a discussion with random people you didn't know before.
Yeah.
So where does that actually happen?
Yeah.
Globally? On the other side, I think. In Cologne, as you said, there are a lot of businesses here. So we used to be kind of like the capital for the media industry, right? So RTL is having kind of like a huge headquarter in Cologne as well. A lot of media companies are here. And I hope actually that also with Homelike and with the initiatives you guys are doing now, that we can promote globally also Cologne as a great place to live, and also like build up businesses, because the infrastructure there. We have venture capital firms here, right? It's not that you need to raise money in Berlin. You can raise money here. You have Coperion, who are also investors in Homelike. You have Capnamic here. All of these guys can also like write larger checks. We have a lot of famous and important business angels here. So I think summarizing all of this, it's a combination of the people here. Cost of living, I don't have any numbers on hand. I think it's not significantly cheaper or more expensive than Berlin. But I think when people decide to live in Cologne, they decide to be surrounded by great people, and also the kind of like adjacency to the Netherlands, to Belgium, to France. I mean, you can easily go there within a couple of hours. So I think this is actually how I would describe Cologne, but I probably need to think a little bit more about that. And not that many people ask me the question though.
No. Well, you echo what I have experienced. As an English person, at the moment, if someone hears my accent, they're just curious about Brexit. If I have that conversation in London, it gets very heated and very toxic very quickly. But in Cologne, whenever we're talking about people over Kolsch, it never even gets close to that. It's curious, they're respectful, the conversation just happens, and it's so naturally, just people across the table just will just shout or talk to you. So I have experienced exactly what you're talking about. And then just to touch on your point about the cost of living compared to Berlin, I can only speak for technology, but we see the salaries are broadly the same. The cost of living when it comes to apartments is marginally cheaper. Not by a lot, but it's slightly less. And then if you're out enjoying the city, dinners, that's also a little bit cheaper as well. So overall, if people are relocating to Cologne from Berlin on the same salary, they'd be a tiny bit better off at the end of each month, but only a small bit. So you've dealt with investors, you've raised money. And I'm curious to see if this perception I have about investment attitudes in Cologne is actually different. So we've all heard stories about, unicorns in Berlin and huge high risk investments, fast growth. We don't hear that so much in Cologne. And my perception is there is a more conservative approach to investment here, and perhaps a bit more focus. Well, I'm trying not to offend anyone in Berlin, but perhaps a bit more focus on profitability and business in Cologne rather than just growth. But I don't know if you feel that that's an accurate perception of investment attitudes here.
I think it depends on the company stage. So does it really matter in our stage, Homelike, where we're at now? Does only the Cologne venture capital network, does that really matter? So we are building a global business here. So we have global investors invested into our business. Spark Capital just did our last funding round a year ago, and they are based in New York and San Francisco. So maybe your question is rather referring to kind of the super early stage investments, kind of like pre-seed and seed, where you are probably more dependent on the local investors network, I would say, because once you have actually made it to Series A, or sometimes also doing seed stage, I think then you really kind of try to get a more holistic understanding of the venture capital scene in Germany and maybe also across. And what we have experienced is that a lot of those investors, also from the UK actually, they do search for smaller businesses outside of their territory. So UK investors invest in pre-seed companies in Germany. German VCs invest in pre-seed companies in the UK. So I don't believe that the city where you are based as a business does matter that much when you're raising your first capital. The second part of your question is, do get Berlin-based startups, do they have easier access to a large amount of capital compared to Cologne businesses, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit what I'm hearing here. I think the reason maybe why you hear so much about hypergrowth companies in Berlin, that the density is probably very different to Cologne. I mean, how many companies can you name who are based in Cologne who have raised more than $20 million in venture capital in the last 5 years? Not that many. And how many have raised more than 20 million in Berlin in the last couple of years? Probably you will come up with a way longer list. And that's the reason, I guess, it's probably a little bit of a biased view on that one, that you hear more stories from Berlin companies. But again, we talked about Trivago. I mean, that's a unicorn business. We also briefly touched base on Chronix, which is not a unicorn business yet, as far as I know, but they've also raised significant amount of money. But there are also other companies who are probably not as communicative as other companies who have raised a lot, but they don't communicate it that much. So I think in the end, when you're a great founders team and you really want to build a huge business, the venture capital network within the city doesn't really matter, or actually is important for the success of your business.
Okay. So when I talk to some startup founders, really young businesses, sometimes I hear some common conversations or conflicts even between founders. So I just want to maybe just throw 2 or 3 at you and see what your opinion would be on your experience. So sometimes you have an option to rush and spend money on sales and marketing, or you could be a bit more patient and spend money perfecting the quality or the performance of your startup's product. So there's lots of factors that would influence, but broadly, where would you see yourself going if that was your choices?
From a scale from 1 to 10, or do I need to decide for either or?
Commit, either or.
I mean, that's a hard one. Again, I think in the early days, I would have probably said, okay, more on the sales and marketing side, in order to fuel the top line growth. Because kind of like these are kind of like two different things: fueling only sales and marketing, which will probably lead to more customers, and investing more in product, which will probably lead to more repeat business, right?
Yeah.
So these are, for me, kind of like two different elements. Obviously, we need to do both, but that's not the answer you were looking for, probably. But the product investment definitely leads to kind of like more repeat business, probably happier customers, less customer acquisition costs, higher customer lifetime value. So what we see over the course of the years, that we are moving more towards kind of like the product side of things, when it comes to your question. But obviously, I would tick both boxes because we want to grow customers and do repeat at the same time.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. That repeat business element from quality, that's actually a much more measurable return that probably tech people may think of, but don't communicate that to their business stakeholders. So for anyone listening that is passionately on the side of, I want to improve the product, but doesn't know how to communicate it to their founder or their stakeholders, that's a very succinct point that I think would just immediately resonate them. I think, okay, actually, yeah, good point. We do need to do that.
And also to add another point here, and depending when you actually kind of like distribute this piece of content here in this interview, I think the startups who are managing capital in the most efficient way will be the winning companies in the future. And capital efficiency, in a sense of rather going towards how can I increase my net revenue, how can I increase my kind of like net take rate, my commission, so on and so forth, instead of always going for new customers, and because it costs a lot of money actually to grow a business heavily, and without doing finger pointing here or mentioning companies, but in the last couple of weeks and months, we have actually heard of a couple of huge companies who probably didn't have a great balance in terms of sales and marketing / focusing on building up larger revenue numbers. Maybe you know about which company I'm talking here. But I think in the next 1 or 2 years, especially when we see a little bit of signs for recession, I think capital efficiency for the venture capital companies, so are not profitable yet, I think that is actually also super attractive for new investors when they take a look at companies that would rather probably invest in companies who have a good understanding how they use the capital, instead of just like showing top line growth, but with like very, very large burn rates on the capital.
Okay. So another question for a small, young startup. Would you hire a small, more expensive team of senior people or high performers, or would you hire a larger, perhaps cheaper per person, less experienced team? Definitely
the first one.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely. And I would probably add one thing. It's actually not about the cost, right? It's I would always go for a smaller team with passionate people who have 100% cultural fit, who really believe in the mission and the vision of the company, who really want to make that work, who really believe in building a huge business, instead of having kind of like average people, but 3 times more people, but 3 times more kind of like average in the sense of they're just like 50% believing in the big business, so on and so forth. So I would always go for hire few people, but be focused on hiring AAA grade. Instead of saying, this guy or girl is kind of like, it's good, but it's not great. And there's like this saying, hire slow, fire fast. I mean, probably that's also something you have heard of. So hiring takes a little bit of time in order to figure out if these are people who really kind of like match up with what you're looking for as a business. So definitely
The concern I hear is that there's a lot of risk. The risk isn't spread. You know, if you have a small team and one of them you lose one of them, that's going to affect you much more than if you have a bigger team and maybe they're not as good. So I guess you have to nail your hiring and make sure you get the right personalities and the right characters, but I would agree as well, a smaller team of like true experts, high performers is probably the better way to go.
And there are a couple of beliefs actually, and you have probably also learned that is hire for attitude and not for skill set. Because educating on attitude is almost impossible, I guess, but educating and teaching and training on skill set it's easier when you have training plans in place, so on and so forth. But also the reason why we founded this business is not only about gigantic market opportunity, we are able to potentially build a unicorn business at some point, but also just work with people we like, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, all these cultural talks, you know, all the companies you meet who have table tennis and all of that stuff, which I don't believe in, to be honest. Mm-hmm. But in the end, the reason why they're probably also doing that, they just want to have fun at work, you know. So kind of like the attitude piece when you hire people, I guess it's super important. And when you have a messed up culture, you can even have like a super nice business, but when people are not enjoying themselves and they're not happy about the work, I think that will also be mirrored and shown in the numbers at some point.
Yeah, that touches on something else actually. I get asked about culture a lot, and some companies are struggling to balance creating a culture that prioritizes staff retention and I guess engagement and happiness versus a culture that prioritizes high performance, especially in sales, for example. You can get a lot of really high performing people that actually are quite toxic to the culture. Mm-hmm. So where do you prioritize that? How do you manage your culture to keep high performance but also keep it healthy?
Great question. So first of all, I think we are still improving, right? So we are not 100% there yet, right? Yeah. So it's actually a progress.
Do you think you could ever be 100% there?
Probably
is that
not.
A battle forever?
Probably not. And I think that's also like an interesting point where you're working in a hyper growth business. You're growing so fast that the processes. Building the processes aside is like it's a super tough thing at the same time, you know. Kind of like growing revenue, it's a sales marketing play, you know. But building up processes, it's not about sales and marketing dollars, right? It's about smart minds and smart people. But coming to your question in terms of retention or recruiting, we're also shifting more towards retention, you know. Recruiting is very, very, very important, but since probably a couple of months ago, where we actually started with talent development, talent assessment, really understanding, do we need a coach for our people managers? Do we have a people manager meeting? What are the concerns and challenges our people managers do have? How many of the people managers have actually managed people already before Homelike? Do we really train them on how to give feedback? Just like the basic ingredients in order to be able to be a good people manager. I think all of these topics are super, super important. And that's also the fascinating thing about startups. So the first employees you hire are almost always potential employees in the sense of that they've never done that before in most of the cases. And you need to help them to grow with the organization. And how can we help them to be successful in the future? And therefore retention and all of that stuff becomes way, way more important for this organization, because when you have a turnover of so many employees, you can't really cope in recruiting, kind of like getting more new people into the business. And at some point, you come to a point where your reputation is going in the wrong direction, you know? And kind of like closing the circle here with Cologne, it's such a small ecosystem. And once you have messed up your reputation, also on a people side, it will probably get harder to attract the top talents and to win the top talents for your business. So you also need to be curious about like how much pressure do you put on the people, how much time do you invest also as a founder but also as a people manager team to kind of like help employees to cope with everyday challenges we do have in our business. So great topic you are actually touching base on. We haven't found yet the secret formula, and probably we will never get to the point. But I think having the mindset and the attitude to constantly work on these topics, I think that's the right way going forward. Yeah, we're working on that one.
All right. Well, I've unfortunately just seen the time. So I'll finish with one last question, which is, I guess, about people and about growth. We have looked at the numbers for where people come from for Cologne businesses, and it's something crazy like 90% from in Germany. So this is specifically within technology talent pools. Cologne loses the most people to Berlin, but it also gains the most people from Berlin. The trade is about even. It then gains people more from places like Hamburg and Stuttgart. And then once you get outside of Germany, the numbers are so small, we couldn't really pull any useful data on it. In your journey growing Homelike, have you followed that trend of actually hiring lots of people from inside of Germany, or have you been a bit more liberal in your strategy and hired people to relocate from outside of Germany?
I think, again, it depends on the department, right? When we talk about tech and product, I think we have 2 people from Germany.
Oh, wow.
And the rest is from across the world. Not saying, to be honest, that has been our strategy. We only want to hire people outside of Germany in tech and product, right? First of all, I think it just happened, to be frank.
A happy accident.
It's a happy accident. I mean, company language is English here. But actually, we would love to have more German engineers and German product managers, UI UX people. But I don't know. Maybe we are more attractive to global-minded people. You know, just like we have people who relocated from California to Cologne in order to join our tech and product team. Wow. You know, I mean, this happens. So maybe we need to be a little bit more active in the German tech product scene. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we use Stack Overflow, which you obviously know, to attract talents. But I can't really give you any insights to which city or continent actually we are losing people. What I'm actually happy about, some tech and product people who left the company in the last couple of years, they started their own business. I mean, it's super sad that they left our journey here, but on the other side, kind of like from an entrepreneurial point of view, I mean, it's great. So maybe we help them kind of like to build their own businesses, and kind of like to shape a little bit the vision, you know. But saying this, having more engineers and product people who wants to join our company would be fantastic, no matter where they're coming from. So it's not really important for us if they're German or not German. They just need to be passionate, great employees, good cultural fit, and then they're welcome.
Nice. Well, before we finish, is there anything that you would want to, I guess, plug about Homelike? I mean, I guess you guys are hiring at the moment. So anyone watching that, check out the careers page.
When you have another 60 minutes, I have definitely some topics I want to mention here. No kidding. Obviously, great employees across every department here. So sales, product, tech, finance, expansion as well. I mean, we're looking for the best talents out there. So happy when you guys actually want to reach out to us. I think on the other side, it would definitely be a good thing when incumbents, kind of like traditional businesses, would be probably a little bit more open-minded for startups in general. Not saying that we're having a hard time getting in front of these guys, but just like having a discussion about startup and digitization, that's nice to have, but we also are businesses who actually solve problems, right? So when kind of like B2B businesses would be a little bit more open, just like to try out new things. Even though the company's not as big as the other providers they're actually used to having the portfolio. I think that would be something to mention here. And the very last point is also coming back to the Cologne topic. I think when we kind of like unite all the startups and founders in the region a little bit better, kind of like have a stronger voice, you know. I think there's so many kind of like things we do here, maybe sometimes a little bit more in an isolated environment. So how can we really kind of like be more engaged, kind of like with the local authorities in a sense. So the city is doing a lot. I know that the Pirate Summit is also helping the city to actually promote a little bit the location here. But I think there are tons of things we can actually actually improve on. We're getting better, but as always, we can actually get better in the future when we do some things a little bit different.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that's a nice close. So that's was supposed to be 20 minutes, turned into almost an hour.
Wow.
So thanks a lot for your time, Dustin. And if anyone's interested in seeing the full conversation, then just leave us a like or a comment below and we'll send the content over to you.